Hi friends. Please subscribe and help me get my first 1,000 subscribers. It's one click for you, but for me it's a huge encouragement and motivation. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's go. Ashley sat on the couch with her legs tucked under her and nervously tapped her fingernails on the phone screen. On the other end of the line was her best friend, Jennifer. Jennifer's voice sounded energetic and persuasive. Ash, you don't understand. This isn't just an escape from routine. It's a way to find yourself and bring passion back into your relationship, she assured. Ashley bit her lip. She looked at the pictures from a few years ago. There she and Michael were glowing with happiness on the beach, embracing each other. Everything had seemed so simple then. But now, after 8 years of marriage, the fire between them had died down. Are you sure this is going to work? She finally asked. I'm sure. Look at me and Steven. He had his doubts at first, but now we have the best marriage of our lives. The key is to explain that it's only temporary. He'll not only understand, but he'll be supportive if you pitch it right. Ashley knew Jennifer wasn't the type to throw words around. Her friend was confident and always got her way. But the idea sounded wild. Still, there was a kind of magnetic confidence in Jennifer's words that made her think. Okay, she said quietly, thinking over the plan. I'll talk to him. Tonight after dinner. All day Ashley felt on pins and needles. She made Michael's favorite dish, pasta with shrimp in a cream sauce. Dinner passed in a relaxed atmosphere. They discussed the day, laughing about some funny video Michael had shown her on his phone. When everything was cleaned up and Michael sat down on the couch with a bottle of beer, Ashley gathered all her courage in her fist, sat down next to him, coughed and said, Michael, we need to talk. He looked at her with slight concern but didn't interrupt. I know this is going to sound sudden, she began, her palms moist with excitement. But I thought we could try something new for our marriage. Something new? He raised an eyebrow. Do you want to get a dog or go on a vacation? Ashley smiled, trying to hide the awkwardness. Not really. It's more of a temporary experiment. She began to explain, avoiding direct language, trying to present the idea as a way to revitalize their relationship. Michael listened to her with surprise at first, then frowned. Wait a minute. Are you saying you're going to date other men? He asked, setting the bottle of beer aside. Ashley felt the heat rising to her face. She nodded, afraid to meet his eyes. It's only temporary, Michael. Just to refresh my senses. We'll come back to each other stronger than ever. He was silent. The silence between them was deafening. Ashley saw Michael's fists clench and his gaze grow cold. And you think this is going to help our marriage? He finally said. Yes, she said with difficulty. Jennifer said it had worked for her. Michael rose abruptly from the couch and paced the room, considering her words. Then he stopped, turning to her. If it's that important to you? I won't stop you, he said, but there was a strange detachment in his voice. Ashley didn't know whether to be glad or afraid. Thank you, Michael. Means a lot to me. But I have one condition, he continued. She tensed, expecting the worst. While you're doing your experiments, I'm moving into the spare bedroom. His words made her wince. What? She whispered. Because I can't share a bed with a man who willfully destroys what we've built together, Michael said with cold determination. Ashley wanted to say something, but she couldn't find the right words. She watched as Michael headed for the stairs to gather his things. There was something ironclad, unwavering in his back. Michael walked up the stairs, feeling a deafening anger boiling in his chest. He tried to keep his cool, but every word Ashley said echoed in his head. She wanted to experiment, to date other men, and expected him to accept it as something normal. Opening the closet in their bedroom, Michael began methodically pulling his clothes off the hangers. His movements were calm, almost machine-like. He folded each shirt neatly into the suitcase, taking care not to leave any creases. A few minutes later, Ashley appeared in the doorway. Are you packing yet? She asked uncertainly, as if she hadn't expected him to take her words seriously. Michael looked back at her, his face impenetrable. Yeah. You said you wanted to try something new. So I'm creating a space for you to do it, he said in a steady voice, going back to his work. Ashley watched him, trying to read his mind. His calmness scared her more than if he'd started yelling. Michael, this is temporary. You understand that, don't you? She tried to explain. He closed the suitcase and looked at her. Of course, he replied with a dry smile. Everything we do in life is temporary. Those words silenced her. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but she forced herself not to panic. If you want, we can talk again. I don't want you to think this is easy for me, she added quietly. There's no need. You've already made up your mind. Michael picked the suitcase up off the floor, heading for the bedroom exit. Ashley stepped forward but stopped, feeling unsure how to continue. I just want you to be happy, she finally squeezed out. Michael stopped in the doorway, turned to her and said, Happy? Ashley, if that's your version of happy, then I'm probably not the right person to give it to you. He turned and walked away, leaving her alone. Ashley heard the spare bedroom door close quietly. She lay in their empty bed, staring up at the ceiling. The thoughts in her head were succeeding each other at breakneck speed. She hadn't expected Michael to react so calmly. It was even worse than if he had yelled at her. There was something frightening about his cold restraint. Ashley decided that the morning would be better. Maybe they could discuss things quietly over breakfast. But in the morning, the house was strangely quiet. Ashley slowly made her way downstairs. She noticed that Michael's keys were missing from the rack by the front door. His favorite jacket wasn't hanging on the hook. There were no shoes in the corner, which always stood there as if to remind her of his habits. A chill went cold in her stomach. Ashley walked to the kitchen to check the coffee machine. It was clean, not even a drop of water in the reservoir. That was another sign. Michael always left it filled. She went back upstairs to the spare bedroom. The bed was made with military precision. The dresser was empty. Opened the closet, his clothes were gone. Even those old t-shirts he only wore at home were gone. Ashley pulled out her phone in a panic and dialed his number. The beep sounded too long, as if mocking her anxiety. Then the answering machine. Michael, it's me. Please call me back as soon as you can, she said in a broken voice and dropped the call. An hour passed. Ashley paced around the house, her thoughts confused. She went through every room, checking to see if there was a single detail that could tell her where he'd gone. Her fingers nervously thumbed through the contacts on her phone until she stopped at Jennifer's name. Jennifer, he's gone, Ashley muttered as soon as her friend answered. What do you mean he's gone? Jennifer asked. He left. Took all his stuff. I can't get a hold of him. Oh, calm down. It's just his way of showing he's upset. You didn't think he'd take it easy, did you? So he's trying to scare you. Scare me? Ashley looked around the empty room. There's none of his stuff left here, Jen. This doesn't look like a joke. Ashley, you have to pull yourself together, Jennifer said insistently. Be patient. He'll be back soon. It's normal. Sometimes men make little protests, but they always come back. Just don't call him first. Make him feel like you're in control. Ashley wasn't sure she wanted to play these games. She hung up the phone, feeling like the situation was getting out of control. Toward evening, she tried to contact their mutual friends. First on the list was Brian, Michael's best friend. Hey Brian, have you seen Michael? She asked, trying to speak calmly. There was a pause on the other end before he answered. No, Ashley. I don't know where he is. But there was something in his voice that alerted her. Are you sure? If he calls suddenly, tell him I'm worried, okay? Of course, Brian replied dryly, and the line went dead. She called several more of Michael's friends and relatives, but each time she heard the same thing. Either they didn't know anything or they were silent. Michael drove down the highway, gripping the steering wheel tightly. He felt betrayed, disappointed, and angry. Scenes of their past life, first dates, trips together, laughter, late-night conversations replayed in his mind. And now all of that appeared to be ruined by her words about a temporary experiment. He parked at the nearest gas station, got out of the car and inhaled the cold air deeply. After a few minutes, he pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number. Hi, it's Michael, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Remember you said you had a room available? Is it still available? The voice on the other end of the line said yes, and Michael nodded, even though his conversation partner couldn't see the gesture. Good. I'll stop by tonight, he said and hung up. Ashley spent the night sitting on the edge of the bed. She wrapped her arms around her head, trying to figure out what to do next. Where could he have gone? Why wouldn't anyone want to help her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car outside the window. She rushed to the window, but it was only the neighbor's Honda. She went back to the phone, dialed Michael's number again, but the answering machine was still answering instead. Late that night, Michael was finishing unpacking his things in a small room on the other side of town. He had rented it from an old friend of his. The room was simple but cozy. There was a desk in the corner and a small bed next to it. Michael sat down in the chair and picked up his phone, staring at the screen for a long time. He had a message written for Ashley, but he never hit send. Instead, he turned the phone off and leaned back, looking up at the ceiling. There was rage inside of him, but he knew the most important thing right now was to stay calm. He had a plan and he was going to put it into action. Meanwhile, Ashley decided to take action. She put on her coat, grabbed her keys and left the house. She drove to several addresses of friends, people she knew. Everywhere the same thing, no sign of him. Back home she was exhausted but still determined. She had to find something, at least one lead. For the entire next week she continued her search. She drove around motels, scoured parking lots, hoping to see his car. But Michael seemed to vanish into thin air. Every day she called him. Each time the same answering machine. She left messages that grew more and more desperate. And yet, she had a strong sense in her soul that it wasn't just a disappearance. She began to realize that Michael wasn't coming back, at least not on her terms. The morning began with the intrusive ringing of the doorbell. Ashley, tired after a sleepless night, barely made it to the door. Her thoughts were still wandering around Michael and his mysterious disappearance. Ashley, still dressed in her pajamas, opened the door and came face to face with Jennifer. She was standing on the doorstep in her perfectly pressed suit, holding a large glass of coffee. "You look awful," Jennifer said, glaring at her friend. "Thanks for the compliment," Ashley mumbled as she led her into the house. "Look, I realize that this whole Michael thing has thrown you off balance, but you need to pull yourself together. You have a job, and that's the most important thing right now," Jennifer said as she walked toward the kitchen table. Ashley nodded but didn't answer. She barely mustered the strength to grab a cup of coffee before heading to the office. When Ashley entered the company building, she found that her co-workers, normally friendly and welcoming, barely cast a glance at her. Their whispers followed her all the way to her desk. "Something's not right here," she muttered, taking off her coat. "Hadn't you noticed?" She heard a whisper behind her. It was Jennifer, who had already gotten a glimpse of the general newsletter. "It looks like we're having a big meeting at 10 in the morning. And you're on the guest list." Ashley frowned. Sudden meetings like this didn't bode well. "It's weird. It's even scary," Jennifer added, taking a seat on the edge of her desk. By 10 o'clock in the morning, Ashley had already thought of 100 possibilities for what the meeting might be about. She walked into the supervisor's office where Eric and Kevin were already sitting. Their faces looked pale and their gazes avoided her. In the corner of the room was the company lawyer with a puffy folder in his hands, and across from him was Mr. Harper, the department head. At the desk on the right, to Ashley's surprise, was Jennifer. Her presence gave her a false sense of confidence. "Have a seat, Ashley," Harper said with a tired look. She sat down, trying to keep a straight face despite the strange tension in the room. "What's going on here?" she asked, trying to remain calm. Harper glanced over to the lawyer, then began to speak. "It has come to our attention that there has been activity in the workplace that is inconsistent with company policy. This applies to your behavior as well as the behavior of Mr. Eric and Mr. Kevin." Ashley felt her palms sweat. "What are you talking about?" The lawyer opened a folder and put several documents on the table, including photos and screenshots. "We received an anonymous lawsuit. It alleges that you used company time and resources for personal meetings, creating a toxic work environment." He began, showing pictures of her and Kevin leaving the company warehouse after their fun in the warehouse. Ashley erupted. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said sharply, looking at Harper. "It doesn't seem like a misunderstanding when we have complaints from other employees who feel uncomfortable with your behavior," he said, trying to remain calm. "Complaints? From who?" Jennifer intervened, her voice firm and confident. "The complainant preferred to remain anonymous," the lawyer replied. Eric, who had been sitting silently until that moment, suddenly pounded his fist on the table. "This is a trap. Someone is deliberately trying to set us up." "Eric, calm down," Ashley whispered, but his words were already hanging in the air. "The company has no choice. To avoid further problems, we have to suspend you all with immediate dismissal," Harper said, folding his hands on the table. Ashley felt the ground slipping away from under her feet. As they left the office, Jennifer grabbed her elbow. "We need to talk," she said, and dragged Ashley toward the warehouse. "This is crazy," Ashley exclaimed when they stopped. "Who would do something like this?" "I don't know," Jennifer replied. "But it's definitely not a coincidence. Someone had a purpose." Ashley covered her face with her hands. "I don't have a job now. No husband. No nothing." "You can still get by," Jennifer said. "We have lawyers. We can fight." But there was an uncertainty in Jennifer's voice that Ashley had never heard before. No matter how hard Ashley tried to stay afloat, circumstances were inexorably destroying everything she was trying to save. Jennifer's attempts to encourage her sounded weaker and weaker, and the prospect of a legal fight with the company seemed increasingly futile. Just a week after the meeting with Harper, a notice arrived at the office, a formal dismissal of all parties involved with immediate effect. It was a blow no one had expected, Not even Jennifer, who had always been optimistic. The scandal went beyond the company. Soon word spread in their local community that employees of a large firm had been fired for unprofessional behavior. None of them could get a job at a decent company anymore. Ashley tried to find a job, but at every interview her past came up. Her resumes lay around for weeks without generating interest from employers. Jennifer, who always looked like she had everything under control, couldn't pull it off this time. Her reputation, always impeccable, was ruined. She had lost all her business contacts and even her old friends had turned their backs on her. Ashley returned home alone, feeling completely broken. She now had no job and no support. Even Michael, who had once been her salvation, refused to come back into her life. His last reply to her letter was simple. "I don't want to see you anymore." Ashley stared at the screen for a long time, feeling the emptiness growing in her chest. She had lost everything because of her selfishness, because of her mistakes, because of her belief in false advice. Now all she had to do was try to piece her life back together, but every movement was difficult. Even though it seemed like she couldn't go any lower, Ashley still decided that she was going to look for a way to rebuild the relationship she had destroyed. Ashley sat in the kitchen, staring at the blank screen of her laptop. She had tried once again to write a letter to Michael, but the words wouldn't fit on the page. Every time she started, her thoughts jumped from guilt to anger, from despair to hope. Gathering her courage, she wrote, "Michael, I realize I've made a huge mistake. I let myself get carried away by other people's ideas, forgetting what really matters. It was not only a mistake, but a betrayal of everything we were building together. You didn't deserve it and I apologize. I'm willing to do anything to earn back your trust. Please give me a chance to prove that I can change." Ashley reread the text a few times, added a couple more lines, then hit send. Now all she had to do was wait again. His first reply came a few weeks later. It was a short, terse email. "Ashley, I've read all your letters. Words are not enough. If you really want it all back, start by taking action. I'll be watching. Michael." She reread the letter several times. It was more than she'd expected, but far less than she'd hoped. "Okay, Michael," she whispered under her breath. "You want action? You'll get it." The first few weeks were the hardest ordeal of her life. Michael stayed out of contact, but from his occasional messages, it appeared that he was watching her actions. He demanded that she write a list of things she was willing to change about herself. Ashley sat over that list all night, trying to be as honest as possible. She listed everything from fixing her self-confidence to giving up Jennifer's influence completely. At the end of the list she wrote, "I am ready to give you control of our relationship. I realize I've ruined it and I'm ready for any of your terms." Her fingers trembled as she sent the letter. Michael called her a month later. It was the first time she'd heard his voice since that evening. "Are you free tomorrow night?" he asked without emotion. "Yes," Ashley answered, barely able to contain her excitement. "Good. We'll meet at the restaurant on Willow Street at 7. Don't be late." It was a chilly evening, but Ashley ignored the cold and stood outside the restaurant 10 minutes before the appointed time. Her hands nervously fiddled with the strap of her bag. Michael showed up at 7 sharp. He looked as focused and confident as ever. "Hi," she said, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "Hi," he replied briefly, gesturing for her to come in. At dinner, the conversation was low-key. Michael asked questions about her changes, her job, or more accurately, her job search after she'd been laid off, and how she viewed their relationship now. Ashley answered honestly, trying to show that she realized her mistakes. "Are you ready to change everything?" he asked, looking her carefully in the eye. "Yes," she answered firmly. "Good. Then I'll have conditions." She nodded, feeling her heart start to pound harder. Michael's terms were simple but demanding. He wanted total control in their relationship. Ashley was to follow his instructions without discussion. She agreed, knowing it was the only way to win him back. At first it was unaccustomed. Michael told her how she should dress, what she should do in her free time. He even forbade her from communicating with Jennifer. That decision was the hardest for her to make, but she knew it was for the best. A few months passed. Ashley tried her best. She learned to listen to Michael, to do what he asked without objection. Gradually he started calling more often, coming over to her house. Their conversations became warmer and the atmosphere between them softer. But she realized that this was only the beginning of the journey. Every move she made was under scrutiny, and she realized that any slip-up could be her last. Ashley awoke to the quiet sound of the alarm clock on her bedside table. She stretched, but just as her hand touched the blanket, the bedroom door was ajar. Michael stood on the doorstep, dressed in a business suit, a cup of coffee in his hands. You overslept, he said briefly, setting the cup on the table. Ashley stood up. She knew she was expected to be punctual. I'm sorry, I just dashed, she started, but Michael held up his hand, interrupting her. Don't make excuses. Just start the day right. You have 10 minutes to be ready. He left as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving her in a state of tense suspense. 10 minutes later, Ashley was already standing in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Michael was reading the newspaper at the table, and occasionally cast brief glances in her direction, as if checking to see if she was doing as he expected. Next time the coffee should be hot, he said, raising the cup to his lips. Yes, of course, Ashley replied, avoiding his gaze. It was a new ritual of their morning socializing. Michael dictated and she listened, trying to correct herself. After breakfast, Michael got up, picked up his briefcase and headed for the door. I'll be home at 8 tonight. Make sure dinner is ready. We'll discuss the task list. Ashley nodded. Of course. The door slammed shut, leaving her in silence. She sank into a chair and covered her face with her hands for a second. Her life had changed beyond recognition, but she felt she was doing the right thing to save their marriage. The day passed in cleaning, shopping, and planning dinner. Ashley was no longer working. Michael had insisted that she stay home, devoting herself entirely to running the household. The decision had seemed strange to her at first, but in time she realized it had its own logic. By 8 o'clock, the house was sparkling clean and a hot meal was on the table. Ashley changed into the dress Michael had picked out for her a few days ago. She fixed her hair in front of the mirror and froze when she heard the sound of the door opening. Hi, she said as Michael walked into the dining room. He nodded without answering, sat down at the table and began to eat his dinner. Ashley watched him, ready to fulfill his every request. After dinner they moved into the living room. Michael pulled out his laptop and opened a document he called Task List. So, what did you do today? He asked, not taking his eyes off the screen. Ashley listed all her chores from grocery shopping to laundry. Good, he said, making notes. You need to meet my brother tomorrow. He's going to take me to the game this weekend, and I want you to help him get the car ready. Sure, she replied, jotting down the task in her notebook. At night, when they were already in bed, Michael spoke again. You're doing fine. But I still see traces of the pride that almost ruined our marriage. Ashley froze, not knowing what to say. I want you to understand that this order isn't a punishment. It's a way to keep us safe. She nodded, feeling a warm feeling rise in her chest. I understand, Michael. Thank you for giving me a second chance. His hand rested on her shoulder. We're going to work on this. Together. A few months passed. Ashley had gotten used to the new rhythm of life. Her days were scheduled to perfection, and although she no longer made her own decisions, she felt relaxed. One evening Michael invited her to dinner at a restaurant. It was unexpected. Such outings had become rare. You deserve it, he said as they sat at a table. Ashley smiled. Thank you, Michael. He took her hand. I'm glad you finally realized what true loyalty is. Ashley felt her eyes fill with tears. I've always loved you, she whispered. Michael looked at her with a warmth she hadn't seen in so long. And so have I, Ashley. 2 years passed. The house that Michael and Ashley lived in had become a symbol of their new life. Everything here was orderly, just like their marriage. Every object had its place, every action its purpose. Ashley had learned not only to accept Michael's rules, but to find a kind of security in them. She no longer thought about the fact that she had once fought for her independence. Now she was happy that Michael had become a mainstay in her life. His confidence and control gave her a sense of stability that she sorely lacked. One of her new rituals was the monthly progress discussions. That evening, as always, Michael sat at his desk with his laptop. Ashley, neatly dressed in the dress he had chosen for her, served tea and sat down across from him. So, Ashley, let's summarize, he began. She opened her notebook to list all the things she had done in the last month. Her voice was confident, though she occasionally glanced at him, trying to catch his reaction. Michael listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. Good work, he said, closing the laptop. I can see you're trying. Ashley felt a warm feeling inside her. Thank you, Michael. He walked over to her, put his hands on her shoulders. You made the right choice, Ashley. You've proven that you're capable of change. She looked up at him and said softly, It's all for us. Exactly, he replied. Their lives seemed to be in perfect rhythm. But in the back of her mind, Ashley felt that there was something more behind the calm. She knew that their relationship would never be equal again. But she also knew that this was her price for a second chance. When Michael announced one evening that he wanted them to move into a new house, she didn't object. "This is a new phase for us," he said. The house was bigger and more modern. Ashley set about fixing it up, following Michael's instructions. Her life now revolved around making him happy. A few more years passed. Ashley sat on the terrace of their new home, watching Michael play in the garden with their son. It was the picture of tranquility she had been looking for so long. As Michael approached her, he held out his hand, helping her up. "Are you happy?" he asked, looking into her eyes. She nodded. "Yes, I am happy." And it was the truth. There were no more doubts or regrets inside her. She had found her place in the world, even if it wasn't the one she had once dreamed of. Michael put his arm around her, and Ashley allowed herself to smile. She may have lost equality in their marriage, but she had gained a family. And that was what mattered most to her. And that concludes our story today. Thank you for watching to the end. If you liked it, please give it a like and leave a comment. Also, we are always happy to discuss any comments you may have. See you in the next video.